July 14th, 1945. Northern Honshu, Japan. A coastline. The water off Kamaishi is grey and cold even in the middle of summer. Smoke rises from the ironworks inland. The furnaces burning coal as they have burned it every morning for longer than anyone working there can remember. Then, on the horizon, shapes, grey holes, massive, deliberate, not hiding. They come in column, flags flying, growing larger with each minute. They could see the ships from shore. The muzzle flash comes before the sound. Even at this distance, it is enormous. A wall of orange light, brief as a camera shutter, then gone. A long pause. Then the sound arrives. Like something breaking deep in the earth. On the halyards of USS South Dakota, a signal flag runs up. Every ship in the force can read it. Never forget Pearl Harbor. The Pacific War began with Japanese aircraft destroying the American battleship fleet at Pearl Harbor. It ended with American battleships standing off Japan's coast, shelling her cities, while the Imperial Japanese Navy chose not to respond. This is how that happened, and what both sides knew that the other didn't. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor, 7:57 in the morning. 353 Japanese aircraft fall on the Pacific Fleet in 2 waves. In 2 hours, they do what no enemy has done in living memory. They put the American battle line on the bottom of the harbor. Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, California, Nevada. 5 battleships sunk or capsized before breakfast. The weight that was supposed to hold Japan at arm's length is gone. What Japan did not sink at Pearl Harbor, and what the United States built to replace what was lost, would define the next 4 years. The Pacific War moves in one direction, west. Each island is a step. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Leyte. Each one another airfield, another anchorage, the map contracting from Japan's point of view. By early 1945, the United States Navy has built something that has never existed before. Task Force 58, 16 aircraft carriers, 8 fast battleships, 20 cruisers, 80 destroyers. More than 1,000 combat aircraft, fighters, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, launchable in under an hour. The force has been forged battle by battle, from the Turkey Shoot in the Philippine Sea to the grinding campaigns from Truk to Luzon. It is now large enough, fast enough, and powerful enough not to raid Japan from the margins but to go directly to the capital. In February 1945, it anchors at Ulithi Atoll in the Caroline Islands. The men get 3 beers on the beach at Mog Mog and wait. The destination is classified. The man commanding this force sits at the rear of his bridge facing the stern. He wears a long-billed baseball cap with the grommet removed so the brim flops forward. A distinctive, unmilitary piece of headgear that has become the most recognizable silhouette in the Pacific Fleet. His brown leather aviator's shoes are non-regulation. When he gives orders, he whispers them. His name is Vice Admiral Mark Andrew Mitcher. He is 57 years old and looks a decade past it. His face is leathered and deeply lined. His frame is slight, almost gaunt. At Annapolis, he was a catastrophe. 159 demerits in a single-class year. He resigned in 1906. His father pulled strings and got him reinstated. He graduated in 1910, 113th out of 131 classmates. What he was, even then, was a flyer. Naval Aviator number 33. He went to sea and didn't come back from it. Ship after ship, year after year, the carrier navy growing up around him. His chief of staff, Commodore Arleigh Burke, put it simply, his flyers worshipped him. The war correspondent Ernie Pyle met him just before the Tokyo raids and wrote afterward, "From now on, Mitcher is one of my gods." He looked out for his pilots. He had been a downed flyer himself. He understood what it meant to be in the water, waiting. His rescue operations for downed aircrew had become legend in the fleet. In October 1941, he was given command of a new carrier, USS Hornet. On April 18, 1942, Captain Mark Mitcher stood on Hornet's bridge and watched Jimmy Doolittle's 16 B-25 bombers roll down the flight deck and lift into the North Pacific sky, the first American aircraft ever to bomb Tokyo. It was a one-way raid. Hornet could carry the planes to within 650 miles of Japan, but could not recover them. The crews knew this when they took off. Mitcher watched them go. He is coming back now. The man on Hornet's bridge in 1942 is the man commanding these 16 carriers, this 1,000-plane armada, sitting backward in his swivel chair, watching the gray North Pacific swells, saying nothing above a whisper. On February 10, 1945, Task Force 58 slips away from Ulithi. Course northeast, the destination still classified for most aboard. The fleet drives north through North Pacific winter. Swells 10 to 15 feet. Gray-green water, gray sky, gray hulls. The temperature drops steadily. At altitude, it will be cold enough to freeze the gun mechanisms in the wing wells of the fighters. On the evening of February 15th, the fleet changes course to the northwest and accelerates. The mission is announced over the ship's intercoms. In 2 days, these carriers will launch the first American strikes against Tokyo since Doolittle in 1942. No one sleeps. More than half the air groups in Task Force 58 have never flown a combat mission. The men who have are thinking about what they know. The men who haven't are thinking about what they don't. In the bunks and passageways of 16 carriers, 60 miles off the coast of Japan, a few thousand pilots and aircrew spend the night with their own company. Dawn, February 16, 1945. The flight decks are full. Hellcats and Helldivers and Avengers spotted and armed, engines turning up, exhaust vapors tearing away in the cold wind. The nearest carrier, Hornet, flagship of Task Group 58.1. is 80 miles from the Japanese coastline. The launch begins. The mission is not to flatten Tokyo. The Marines go ashore on Iwo Jima in 3 days. That small volcanic island hosts Japanese airfields capable of throwing airstrikes against the invasion fleet throughout the landing. The airfields around Tokyo are the real target. Disrupt them, destroy what can be destroyed, deny Japan the ability to mass its air power against the beaches. That is what this fleet has come to do. For 2 solid days, American aircraft are over the Tokyo area and Tokyo Bay. Task Group 58.5, Enterprise and Saratoga, the fleet's night-trained carrier division, maintains coverage through the dark hours. Night Hellcats hunting over Japanese fields and keeping them from recovering. Japan had absorbed months of B-29 strikes from the Marianas. She has never seen this. Enemy carrier fighters over the capital. Ships on the water 60 miles from shore. The B-29 was a sound from high altitude, a flash, a distant fire. This is something else entirely. The guns freeze in some of the wing wells. The pilots clear them and keep flying. American aviators claim 341 Japanese aircraft shot down and nearly 200 more destroyed on the ground. Japan's Imperial General Headquarters admits to 78. The truth lies somewhere between. What is not in dispute is what was achieved. The airfields around Tokyo are disrupted. Japan cannot mass its remaining air power against the Iwo Jima beaches. 3 days later, when the Marines wade ashore, they face what they face, but not everything. Task Force 58 sails south. In 2 days of operations, 60 miles off the Japanese coast, not one of its ships is hit. 5 days later, the bill comes. February 21st. Task Force 58 is off Iwo Jima, its carriers flying round-the-clock support for the Marines ashore. Among them is USS Saratoga, CV-3, the oldest carrier in the fleet, laid down as a battlecruiser in 1920 and converted under the Washington Naval Treaty before completion. She has been fighting since the first day of the war. She has come back from damage before. She has come back from everything. The kamikazes hit her 5 times. When the fires are out, Saratoga's flight deck is torn and useless. She will be repaired, but she will never return to the Pacific. The ship that survived Guadalcanal and the Solomons and came all the way back to Japan's coast is done. The chain of consequence, though, is already running. The Tokyo carrier raids disrupted Japan's air power in the north. Disrupted air power meant the Marines at Iwo Jima faced a manageable battle rather than sustained air assault throughout. Iwo Jima, once taken, gives the B-29 campaign something it has desperately needed. Emergency landing fields for damaged bombers, airstrips close enough for fighter escorts. The chain runs from February to August. There is one more link. It will take until August to close. By the summer of 1945, the United States Navy has a problem it could not have imagined in December 1941. The Imperial Japanese Navy is dead in harbor. The great fleet that fought from Pearl Harbor to Leyte Gulf. The carriers, the battleships, the cruisers, crippled by air attack, paralyzed by fuel starvation. Of the 12 battleships Japan operated during the war, not one is in fighting condition, and so the United States Navy, which went to war because its battleships were sunk, finds itself in the summer of 1945 with a surplus of battleships and nothing for them to fight. The decision to use them against Japan's industrial coastline carries both strategic purpose and something less easily stated in official orders. The Navy's senior leadership wanted to close an account. The ships that survived Pearl Harbor, rebuilt, repaired. The ships laid down in the years since to replace what was lost. They were going to Japan. They were going to fire at Japan's cities with 16-inch guns from close enough that the people on shore could watch it happen. July 14, 1945. Northern Honshu. Midday. Kamaishi. The signal flag runs up South Dakota's halyards. Never forget Pearl Harbor. An hour later, the guns open on the Japan Iron and Steel Company's works. The battleships fire from 27 kilometers out, moving steadily closer. The concussion from their shells overturns cooking stoves across the city, starting fires that spread before anyone can reach them. Shore batteries return fire. Their shells fall short and wide. In 2 hours, 802 rounds fall on the steel plant. What the men on those ships do not know, and will not learn until after the war is over, is that Allied prisoners of war are being held in camps near the Kamaishi ironworks. 32 of them are killed in the bombardment. The signal flag said, "Never forget Pearl Harbor." The men flying that signal had no idea they were shelling their own. On the same day, hundreds of miles to the north, a second force hits Muroran on Hokkaido, Japan's second island beyond the range of the B-29s, a place where the war has until now been distant. Fast battleships Iowa, Missouri, and Wisconsin open fire on the Nihon Steel Company and the Wanishi Ironworks. Iowa finds the furnaces on the second salvo. A massive explosion from Missouri's guns is visible from miles away. Hokkaido had been a distant war until this morning. 3 nights later, the largest battleship bombardment of the campaign begins in rain and fog. Hitachi, an industrial city 80 miles northeast of Tokyo. The weather is too poor for spotting aircraft. 6 Allied battleships, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Alabama, and HMS King George V of the Royal Navy, aim entirely by radar. They open fire at 11 at night. The muzzle flashes illuminate the sea for miles in every direction. The city catches fire. The flames are visible from the ships. By the time the guns stop, at 1 in the morning, the American battleships alone have fired 1,238 16-inch shells. Britain is here. The Royal Navy which lost Repulse and Prince of Wales to Japanese aircraft in December 1941, stands off Japan's coast in the rain and puts 14-inch shells into her factories. The next morning, 30,000 people walk out of Hitachi and do not come back. Hitachi had already endured 30 air raids before this night. The people knew bombs. The sound of B-29s at altitude, the flash from high up, the distant thunder of high explosive. They had survived 30 raids. They had never seen this. The B-29 was invisible. The battleships were not. No official statement, no government reassurance, explains grey hulls, sitting on the water off your coast with their guns trained on your city. The war their government had promised them, the inviolable homeland, the divine wind driving all invaders back, was visible on the horizon, and it was steel. Japan knew. Imperial General Headquarters had anticipated the naval bombardments. They had planned for them. The decision made in Tokyo was not ignorance or incapacity, but deliberate calculation. Do not respond. Roughly 5,000 aircraft sat on Japanese airstrips through these weeks. Grounded, fueled, armed, waiting. Kamikaze pilots trained. Fighter pilots flew practice sorties. The aircraft were there. The order to use them against the battleships never came. Japan's military planners understood, correctly as far as they knew, that the Americans would eventually have to invade the home islands. Every aircraft lost in the summer of 1945, every pilot killed over a coastal bombardment zone was one less weapon for the only battle that now mattered. The decisive beach battle, Ketsugo. The entire surviving military capacity of the Japanese Empire, every aircraft, every gun, every suicide boat, was being held in absolute reserve for the moment Allied soldiers tried to come ashore. So Japan watched American battleships shell Kamaishi and Muroran and Hitachi, held its forces down, and waited for the thing it was certain was coming. What Japan could not know, what no one standing on the shore of Honshu could know, was that the invasion was already unnecessary. In the desert of New Mexico, a weapon had been built, tested, and was waiting. 2 of them, the 5,000 aircraft being preserved for the beaches, would never fly against an invasion. The invasion would never come. The Japanese High Command sat with its calculation and held its nerve and waited for a battle that had already been made irrelevant by something they had never been told existed. The grounded planes sat in their rows. The engines stayed cold. August 9th, 1945. Battleships South Dakota, Indiana, and Massachusetts returned to the Kamaishi Iron Works. The same target as July 14th. 803 16-inch shells fall on what is left of the plant. It is the last battleship bombardment of Japan. At this same moment, on the other side of Honshu, the second atomic bomb falls on Nagasaki. The battleship crews do not know. Japan's High Command does not know. The people of Kamaishi do not know. On opposite sides of the same island, the last act of the old war and the decisive act of the new one are happening simultaneously, and no one on either shore can see across the mountains. The shells fall in the north. The bomb falls in the south. 6 days later, Japan surrenders. On September 2nd, 1945, USS Missouri drops anchor in Tokyo Bay. The surrender ceremony is held on her fantail. Representatives of the Japanese government come aboard and sign the instrument of surrender on the deck of a battleship that 2 months earlier was firing 16-inch shells into Japanese steel mills. The same guns, the same ship. The war ends where the shelling stopped. Mark Mitcher had gone home in July before any of this. He was relieved of command and ordered back to Washington. He was 58 years old and looked 70, lean and gray and very quiet. The men who saw him at the end described a man who had given the work everything he had. He died on February 3rd, 1947, at the Naval Hospital in Norfolk, Virginia. Coronary thrombosis. He was 60 years old. His Navy Cross citation for the period January to May 1945 reads in part, penetrated enemy home waters to the shores of the main Japanese islands, striking airfields and installations in the Tokyo and Kyushu area. The language of citations is the language of accumulation, dates, areas, objectives. What it does not record is the long road from Annapolis to Hornet, to the backward chair on the flag bridge of a 16-carrier fleet. The whispered orders, the pilots going out and coming back and going out again, the face growing more leathered each month, the body spending down what it had. The war did not kill him the way wars kill, but it used him, and what was left when it was done was not enough to last. Admiral Nimitz said of him, "It is doubtful if any officer has made more important contributions than he toward extinction of the enemy fleet." The chain closes here. The Tokyo carrier raids disrupted the air power that would have bled the Iwo Jima landings. Iwo Jima gave the B-29 campaign fighter escorts and emergency landing strips. The B-29 campaign delivered what finished the war. That chain begins with Mitcher sitting backward in his chair on the flag bridge of a carrier 60 miles from Japan, watching the planes go off into the gray North Pacific dawn. One last ship, the Nagato, Japan's great battleship, the one from whose bridge Admiral Yamamoto ordered the attack on Pearl Harbor, was still afloat when the war ended. She was the only Japanese battleship that was. The others had been sunk at sea or bombed in harbor or left listing in their anchorages. The Nagato survived everything. After the surrender, she was handed over to the United States. In 1946, she was towed to Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands and used as a target in the Operation Crossroads nuclear tests. She survived the first blast. The second underwater detonation sank her. The age of the battleship ended where the age of the atomic bomb began. The carriers that opened the door to Japan in February 1945 were already the future. The battleships that stood off her coast that summer were already the past. They had their moment. The signal flag running up, the guns turning toward the shore, the shells falling on the steel plants while people on the hillside watched and understood, perhaps before anyone said it plainly, that the war their government had promised them was over. It was enough.